Stepmother spent the money my father gave me, and spent it on her children. When it went too far, I intervened with my lawyer, and now she has a divorce document. The first time she took my money, I thought it was a misunderstanding. My dad had given me $200 for my birthday and told me to treat myself. I was excited I could finally get the art supplies I'd been eyeing for months. But the next day, when I went to get the money from my nightstand, it was gone. I asked my stepmother Dana if she'd seen it. She didn't even hesitate. "Oh, I took it," she said flatly. "The twins needed new shoes and we were short this week. Your dad would understand." I was stunned. It wasn't her money to take, but I didn't say anything. I was 18, barely an adult, and still getting used to the idea of standing up for myself. Besides, Dana had a way of making me feel small with just one look. After that, it became a pattern. Every time Dad gave me an allowance, Dana would swoop in and either take it outright or come up with some guilt trip about how her kids needed things more than I did. The worst part? She'd threaten to kick me out if I told Dad. "You're an adult now," she'd say. "You think your dad's going to keep letting you mooch off him if you start stirring up trouble?" I was terrified. My dad traveled a lot for work, so he wasn't around to see what was going on. And Dana made sure to act like the perfect stepmother when he was home, cooking elaborate dinners, fawning over him, and even pretending to care about me. It was exhausting. For 2 years I let her walk all over me, too afraid to fight back. But the breaking point came when she took the money Dad had given me for college textbooks. I was furious, but when I confronted her, she just smiled and said, "Go cry to someone who cares." That's when I realized I couldn't let this go on. If Dana thought I was going to roll over and let her keep stealing from me, she was dead wrong. And that's when things started to change. After Dana stole the money from my textbooks, I knew I had to do something. But what? I had no idea how to stand up to her without risking everything. I couldn't just pack up and leave. I was still living at home, barely making enough from my part-time job to cover my other expenses. And honestly, I didn't want to leave my dad. He'd always been there for me, even if he didn't know what Dana was doing behind his back. One night, while scrolling through Reddit for advice, I came across a thread about stepfamily conflict. Someone mentioned consulting a lawyer if things got out of hand. It seemed extreme, but the idea stuck with me. The next day, I called a local law firm and explained my situation. I half expected them to laugh me off, but the attorney I spoke with, Mr. Hensley, didn't. "It's not just about the money," he said. "If she's threatening you or taking what's yours, that's serious. You have rights, even if you're living in her house." I met with him the next week. Sitting in his small office, I laid it all out: every dollar Dana had taken, every time she'd used her kids as an excuse, every threat she'd made to throw me out. Mr. Hensley listened intently, taking notes and asking questions. Then he leaned back in his chair and said something that shocked me. "You're not just dealing with a greedy stepmother. This could be considered financial abuse, especially if your father entrusted you with this money. We can gather evidence, but you're going to have to be smart about it." He gave me a list of things to start doing. Keep a record of every time Dana took money, write down what she said when she threatened me, and try to get any evidence I could: texts, receipts, anything. When I left his office, I felt a mix of emotions: relief that someone believed me and fear of what would happen if Dana found out what I was doing. But I knew I couldn't live like this anymore. That night I started my diary. I wrote down every incident I could remember, every detail of the last 2 years. And the next time Dana came for my money, I'd be ready. I had no idea how far this would go or how much it would change everything. But for the first time in years, I felt like I had a plan. Dana didn't wait long to give me more ammunition. A week after my meeting with Mr. Hensley, my father left on another business trip. As usual, Dana immediately started sniffing around to see if I'd been given any money. "So, did your dad give you anything to buy groceries while he was gone?" she asked casually. I knew what she was really asking, but I played dumb. "He just transferred some money to my account." I lied, even though Dad had given me $100 in cash the night before. I'd hidden it in the pocket of an old jacket, just where Dana would never think to look. The next day she cornered me in the kitchen. "Give me that," she said, holding out her hand. "For what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She sighed, as if she were dealing with a stubborn child. "The twins need materials for a school project, and we're stretched thin. Don't be selfish." I hesitated, but I already knew how this would end. If I refused, she'd make my life miserable, lectures, slamming doors, the works. So I reached into my wallet, pulled out a $20 bill, and handed it to her. "This is all I have," I said. She didn't look happy, but she took it and walked away. The second she left, I grabbed my phone and wrote everything down, what she said, the amount she took, and the date. I began to feel like an undercover spy. Over the next few weeks, I built a rock-solid case. I took every opportunity to document her behavior. I even managed to get a photo of her rifling through my room while she thought I was out. Another time, I recorded her yelling at me when I hesitated to hand over a $50 bill. It was exhausting and stressful, but I kept telling myself it was worth it. The final piece of the puzzle came when I caught her trying to transfer money from my Venmo account. I'd left my laptop open, and she didn't realize I'd set up alerts for any changes. The alert popped up on my phone while I was in the other room, and I rushed back just in time to see her typing. "What are you doing?" I asked. She froze, then slammed the laptop shut. "Don't leave your stuff lying around," she snapped, and walked out like nothing had happened. That was it. I took screenshots of the alert, saved the browser history, and sent everything to Mr. Hensley. "This should be enough to prove what's going on," he said when we spoke later. "Now it's up to you to decide when to confront your father." I wasn't ready. Not until I was sure I could convince him. But I knew the moment was coming, and I wasn't going to hold back. The hardest part wasn't gathering the evidence, it was deciding how to tell my dad. Dana had spent years convincing him that she was the perfect wife and stepmother. I wasn't sure how he'd take it, but I couldn't wait any longer. One night, after Dad returned from a business trip, I asked if we could talk. We sat down in the living room, and I could feel my hands shaking as I began. "Dad, I have to tell you something about Dana." He frowned, looking worried. "What is it?" I took a deep breath. "She's been taking money from me. Every time you give me something, whether it's for my birthday, groceries, or school, she finds a way to take it. And she threatens me if I say anything." His face immediately darkened. "That doesn't sound like Dana. Are you sure this isn't a misunderstanding?" I expected him to doubt me, so I pulled out my phone. I knew you wouldn't believe me, so I kept track. I showed him the photos, recordings, and notes I'd been collecting for months. I didn't say anything as he scrolled through it all, her going through my stuff, her screaming, the Venmo alert. When he finally looked up, he seemed lost. Like he couldn't process what he was seeing. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "She threatened to kick me out," I said quietly. "And you're not here much." I was afraid. He leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. "I need time to think about it." I nodded, not pushing him any further. I knew he needed to process everything, but at least the truth was out. For the next few days, Dad was quieter than usual. Dana didn't seem to notice. She went about her usual routine, acting as if nothing was wrong. But I could see the wheels turning in his head. He started coming home from work earlier, watching her more closely, and asking subtle questions about money. Then one morning I heard them arguing in the kitchen. "Where's the money I gave you to buy groceries last week?" Dad asked. "I spent it on the kids," Dana casually replied. "All of it?" he pressed. "You think feeding 2 kids is cheap?" It wasn't explosive, but it was enough for me to know that he was beginning to see the cracks in her story. The evidence had planted a seed of doubt, and it was growing. I just hoped it would be enough. A few days later, Dad came to me with a serious look on his face. "I've been thinking about what you said, and I can't ignore the evidence. I'm going to take care of it." "What are you going to do?" I asked. "You'll see," he said. I didn't know what that meant, but for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't fighting this battle alone. It didn't take long for Dad to make his move. A few nights later, he came home with a folder under his arm and a look on his face I'd never seen before, cold, serious, and determined. I stayed out of the way, knowing this was between him and Dana, but I couldn't stop myself from hanging around, trying to hear what was going on. They started in the kitchen. At first I couldn't make out the words, just the deep rumble of Dad's voice and Dana's sharper replies. But then their voices got louder and I heard him say, "I know what you've been doing." Dana's tone became defensive. "What are you talking about?" "Doing what?" "You took money from my daughter." "Stealing from her." "Threatened her." His voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the anger underneath. "That's ridiculous. She's lying. Why would I steal from her when we're married and share everything?" Dana's laugh was bitter, almost mocking. "I've seen the proof, Dana," he said firmly. "Photos, recordings, texts. You've been using her for years. And I let you do it because I trusted you. That ends now." There was a long silence, and I could only imagine the look on Dana's face. Finally she spoke, her voice deep and venomous. "She's turning you against me. Are you really going to believe her over me? This isn't about who I believe, it's about what's true. And the truth is that you've betrayed both of us." After that, her voice faded, and I couldn't hear much more. But I heard the sound of papers being slammed on the counter and Dana yelling, "You can't be serious." It wasn't until later that I found out what had happened. The papers Dad was handing her were divorce papers. He'd already talked to a lawyer and decided to call it quits. When Dana stormed out of the kitchen, her face was red with anger. She didn't look at me as she grabbed her car keys and left the house, slamming the door behind her. For the first time in 2 years, the house felt quiet, peaceful. Dad found me sitting on the stairs and sat down beside me. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have seen it sooner. It's not your fault," I said, and I meant it. He put his arm around me, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt safe. But it wasn't over. Dana wasn't the type to go down without a fight, and I knew there would be more fallout. But at least now I wasn't facing it alone. I should have known that Dana wouldn't go away quietly. For a few days after she stormed out, it was like the calm after a storm, eerily quiet, but full of tension. I stayed on edge, half expecting her to come back at any moment and try to wreak havoc. When she finally returned, it wasn't in person. Instead, she began sending angry texts to Dad, demanding that he call off the divorce. She accused me of manipulating him, claimed the evidence I'd shown him was fake, and even tried to guilt him by saying, "You'll ruin the kids' lives if you do this." Dad didn't respond to most of this. When he did, it was short and to the point. "This is not up for discussion. You have made your decision." That's when Dana turned her attention to me. She called me one afternoon, her voice icy and venomous. "You think you've won, don't you?" I remained calm. "I don't know what you're talking about. You think your daddy's going to let you live happily ever after? Let me tell you something, you've just made things worse for yourself. I'm going to make you regret this." I hung up without another word, my heart racing. I didn't know what she was up to, but I knew she wasn't bluffing. Sure enough, a few days later, Dana started spreading rumors about me. She called relatives, mutual friends, even some of Dad's coworkers, and painted me as a spoiled, manipulative liar who was tearing her family apart. I started getting texts from people asking me if it was true that I'd set Dana up. I told Dad what was happening, and he looked angrier than I'd ever seen him. "I'll take care of it," he said, and I believed him. But Dana didn't stop there. She tried to involve her children, telling them that I was the reason their family was falling apart. I felt terrible, they were just kids, and they didn't deserve to be dragged into this. I overheard one of them telling Dad on the phone, "Mom says she's doing all this for us." Through it all, Dad didn't waver. He doubled down on the divorce proceedings, cutting Dana off financially and demanding that she move out of the house. She fought back, of course, claiming she had nowhere to go. But the truth was, Dana had always been good at taking care of herself, at least when it came to getting what she wanted. She wasn't as helpless as she pretended to be. Through it all, I kept reminding myself that this was temporary. Dana could rage and scheme all she wanted, but the truth was on my side. And I wasn't the scared, powerless girl she'd bullied for years. It was exhausting, but with Dad backing me up, I knew we could get through it. Dana may have been determined to make us suffer, but for the first time, her power over me was gone. The day Dana moved out was the first time I felt like I could really breathe. She didn't go quietly, of course. She spent hours packing her things, slamming doors, and muttering under her breath about how unfair it was, how Dad was going to regret it, and how I'd ruined her life. Dad remained calm through it all, standing firm. He'd already set the terms with his lawyer. Dana could take what was hers, but everything else stayed. He made sure the kids were taken care of, and even offered to help with their expenses while she got back on her feet. When Dana finally left, dragging her children with her, the silence she left behind felt unreal. No more walking on eggshells. No more stolen money. No more threats. Dad and I didn't say much to each other that night. We ordered pizza, sat on the couch, and watched an old action movie he loved. For the first time in years, it felt like things were back to normal, or as close to normal as they could be after everything that had happened. In the weeks that followed, things slowly settled down. Dad focused on work, but made it a point to spend more time with me. I started putting the money I earned into a savings account without fear that someone would take it. Occasionally we'd hear from Dana. She would send angry texts or try to guilt Dad into reconciling, but he ignored her. Once she even showed up at the house, banging on the door and demanding to talk. Dad calmly told her to leave or he'd call the police. That was the last time we saw her. What surprised me most was how quickly the bond between Dad and I began to heal. I hadn't realized how much her presence had strained our relationship. Without her manipulation and lies, it was as if we could finally see each other clearly again. One night, as we sat in the kitchen, Dad looked at me and said, "I'm proud of you, you know." "For what?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "For standing up for yourself. For not letting them get away with it. I wish I'd seen it sooner, but you handled it better than I would have at your age." I didn't know what to say. Hearing it from him meant more than I realized. Life isn't perfect now, but it's ours again. The house feels like home, just the two of us. And every time I look at my savings account, I'm reminded that I'm in control of my life now. Dana is gone, and she can't take anything from me.